When you accept the chaos, peace finally appears. Not because the chaos stops, but because you stop fighting it. And that shift, that internal surrender to what is, changes everything. Most people spend their entire lives waiting for circumstances to settle down before they allow themselves to feel peace. They think peace is something that arrives when the problems are solved, when the relationship is stable, when the bank account is full, when the health issue resolves, when everyone finally understands them. But here's what Andrew Huberman's research on the nervous system reveals, combined with ancient wisdom that Viktor Frankl proved in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. Peace is not the absence of chaos. Peace is what happens when you stop resisting chaos and start working with it. Your nervous system, your brain, your entire biological framework is designed to handle chaos. What it's not designed to handle is the constant internal war you wage against reality when you refuse to accept what's actually happening. Think about the last time you were in the middle of a truly chaotic situation. Maybe it was a crisis at work, a relationship falling apart, a financial disaster, a health scare, something that turned your world upside down. In that moment, you had two options. You could fight against it, resist it, spend all your energy trying to force reality to be different than it was. Or you could accept it. And I don't mean give up. I mean truly accept that this is what's happening right now. This is the reality you're dealing with. And no amount of mental resistance is going to change the facts. When Frankl was in Auschwitz, stripped of everything, watching people die around him every single day, he could have spent every moment fighting the reality of where he was. He could have descended into bitterness, into rage at the injustice, into complete psychological collapse. And many did. But Frankl made a different choice. He accepted the chaos. Not because he liked it, not because he thought it was right, but because he understood something profound. The only freedom that couldn't be taken from him was the freedom to choose his response to what was happening. He couldn't control the chaos, but he could control whether he let that chaos destroy his inner world. Here's what happens in your brain when you're in resistance mode versus acceptance mode. And this is where Huberman's work becomes crucial. When you resist reality, when you're constantly thinking this shouldn't be happening, this isn't fair, why is this happening to me? Your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, stays activated. Your body floods with cortisol and adrenaline. Your nervous system interprets the situation as a threat that needs to be fought or fled from. But here's the problem. You can't fight or flee from reality itself. So you end up in a state of chronic stress, where your body is constantly preparing for a battle it can never win. Your sleep suffers. Your immune system weakens. Your ability to think clearly diminishes. You're not just dealing with the actual chaos anymore. You're dealing with the chaos plus the enormous energy drain of resisting it. But when you accept chaos, something neurologically shifts. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function and emotional regulation, comes back online. Your nervous system starts to regulate. You move from a reactive state to a responsive state. And in that shift, you suddenly have access to resources, to creativity, to resilience that was completely unavailable when you were fighting reality. I know a woman who went through this transformation in the most painful way. Her husband left her after 20 years of marriage. No warning, no real explanation, just gone. And her first reaction was complete resistance. This can't be happening. This isn't supposed to happen. We were supposed to grow old together. She spent months in that resistance, barely sleeping, barely eating, replaying every conversation, analyzing every moment, trying to figure out what she could have done differently. Her friends kept telling her to move on, to accept it. But she couldn't because accepting it felt like giving up, like saying it was okay that he left. Then one night, exhausted and broken, she stopped fighting. She didn't stop caring. She didn't stop hurting. But she stopped resisting the reality that he was gone. She said out loud to herself, "This is what happened. This is my life now. I didn't choose it, but this is what is." And in that moment of acceptance, something cracked open. Not happiness, not relief, but space. Space to breathe, space to think. Space to start asking different questions. Not why did this happen, but who am I going to be now that it has? Within weeks, her energy started coming back. Her sleep improved. She started seeing possibilities she couldn't see before because she was too busy fighting what was. 2 years later, She told me that accepting the chaos of her marriage ending was the moment her real life began, because she stopped living in resistance to reality and started living in response to it. This is what most people miss about acceptance. They think it means becoming passive, letting life happen to you, tolerating abuse or injustice or pain without fighting back. But that's not what acceptance is. Acceptance is acknowledging what is true right now, without adding layers of resistance that drain your energy and cloud your judgment. You can accept that you're in a difficult situation and still take action to change it. You can accept that someone hurt you and still set boundaries. You can accept that life is chaotic and still build something meaningful within that chaos. The difference is that you're not wasting energy fighting reality itself. You're directing that energy toward what you can actually control, which is your response. Frankl called this tragic optimism, the ability to maintain meaning and purpose even in the face of unavoidable suffering. He didn't say ignore the suffering. He said accept that it's there, and then choose what you're going to make of it. Here's a practical example of how this works in everyday chaos, not just extreme circumstances. You're stuck in traffic. You're late for an important meeting. Your first instinct is resistance. This is ridiculous. Why is there always traffic when I need to be somewhere? I shouldn't have taken this route. Now everything is ruined. And you sit there, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart rate elevated, stress hormones flooding your system, as if your resistance to the traffic is going to make the cars move faster. It doesn't. The traffic doesn't care about your resistance. All that happens is you arrive at your meeting not just late, but also emotionally depleted and physiologically stressed. Now imagine accepting it. You're in traffic. You can't change it. This is what's happening right now. Your body relaxes slightly. Your mind stops spinning. You might even use the time to listen to something interesting, to think through what you want to say in the meeting, to just breathe. You still arrive. Late, but you arrive as a person who dealt with chaos instead of being destroyed by it. That's the difference acceptance makes, and it scales up to every level of chaos you face. Huberman talks about how our nervous system has this incredible capacity for what he calls stress inoculation, the ability to build resilience by learning to regulate ourselves in the face of stressors. But here's the key. You can't build that resilience if you're constantly in resistance mode. Resistance keeps you in chronic activation. Acceptance allows you to move through the stress response and return to baseline, which is where growth happens. Every time you accept chaos instead of fighting it, you're literally training your nervous system to handle more. You're building psychological flexibility, which is one of the strongest predictors of mental health and life satisfaction. People who can accept chaos, who can adapt to what is instead of demanding that reality conform to their preferences, those are the people who thrive in any environment. Not because they have easier lives, but because they're not adding the weight of resistance to whatever weight they're already carrying. So what does this look like in your life right now? What chaos are you resisting? What reality are you fighting against that you actually have no power to change? Maybe it's a health diagnosis. Maybe it's aging. Maybe it's a loss you can't reverse. Maybe it's a person who won't change no matter how much you want them to. Maybe it's your own past, your own mistakes, your own limitations. You've been pouring energy into resisting these things, into thinking they shouldn't be true, into waiting for them to be different before you can have peace. But they are true. They are your reality right now. And the longer you fight that reality, the longer you stay in chaos without accessing the peace that's available on the other side of acceptance. Frankl would tell you that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is your power to choose your response. But you can't access that space if you're busy denying the stimulus. You have to accept what happened before you can choose what comes next. Here's what I want you to try, not as a philosophical exercise but as a real practice. Tonight, before you go to sleep, write down one thing in your life that's chaotic right now. One thing you've been resisting, one reality you've been fighting against. Then write this sentence. This is what is happening right now. I don't have to like it. I don't have to think it's fair. But this is what is. And then notice what happens in your body when you stop fighting it, even just for a moment. Notice if there's a softening, a release, a tiny bit of space where there was only tension before. That's the beginning of acceptance, and it's also the beginning of peace. Not because the chaos disappeared, but because you stopped making the chaos worse by adding resistance to it. You're still going to take action. You're still going to problem solve. You're still going to work toward what you want, but you're going to do it from a place of acceptance rather than resistance, which means you're going to do it with clarity, with energy, with resilience instead of from a place of depletion and desperation. When you accept the chaos, Peace finally appears because you realize that peace was never dependent on external circumstances being perfect. Peace is what's left when you stop fighting what is. It's your natural state underneath all the resistance. Frankl proved this in a concentration camp. Huberman explains the neuroscience of why it works. And you can experience it right now, today, in whatever chaos you're facing, if you're willing to stop demanding that reality be different and start working with what actually is. The chaos isn't going away. Life is chaotic. People are unpredictable. Circumstances change. You can't control most of what happens to you. But you can control whether you waste your energy fighting reality, or whether you accept it and use that energy to build something meaningful within it. That choice, that shift from resistance to acceptance, is where peace lives. Not someday when everything calms down. Right now, in the middle of the storm, when you finally stop fighting the wind and learn to adjust your sails instead.